A creature with 100 heads coils silently around a tree of solid gold. This is Ladon, the dragon of ancient Greek myth, tasked with guarding the ultimate treasure from both gods and mortals. By the end of our story, you will know the full epic of this forgotten guardian, from his primordial birth to his eternal place in the stars. We will uncover how a hero outsmarted the unsleeping watchman and why an immortal being could be slain. What does it truly mean to be the guardian of something priceless? Far from the mortal world, on the very edge of the Western Ocean, lay a garden untouched by time or sorrow. This was the realm of the Hesperides, the nymphs of the golden light of sunset. Their orchard was not of ordinary earth and tree. It was a divine preserve where the soil itself shimmered with a celestial glow and the air hummed with a quiet, eternal magic. At its heart stood a single tree, its bark like polished brass and its leaves like emeralds, but its fruit was the true marvel. These were the golden apples, not merely golden in color, but forged from the essence of immortality itself. They were a wedding gift from the earth to the queen of the gods, a symbol of a power so absolute that even the other Olympians looked upon them with desire. For any god to possess one was to reaffirm their divine status, a tangible piece of eternal youth. For a mortal, to taste its flesh was to grasp at a destiny beyond their reach, to become something more than human. This was not a simple piece of fruit, it was a key to the very power of the gods, and a treasure of such magnitude could never be left unguarded. Yet such a magnificent ward was not born of the gentle powers of Olympus. Ladon's origins lie far deeper in the shadowy, primordial world that existed before the gods. He was a direct descendant of the earth and the sea, born from the union of two ancient titans, Phorcys and Cetus. These were not the orderly titans who ruled the cosmos, but rather the old gods of the hidden depths. Phorcys was the lord of the sea's strange and unseen dangers, while Cetus was the goddess of all the terrors that swam within it. Their children were not beautiful nymphs or heroic figures. They were the great monsters of myth, embodiments of the world's raw, untamed, and often frightening power. Ladon was the brother to the Gorgons, whose gaze could turn a man to stone, and to the Grei, the three ancient crones who shared a single eye and tooth. This lineage tells you everything about his fundamental nature. He was not a creature of chaos or mindless destruction like the monster Typhon. He was a being of immense primal power, purpose built for a single eternal task. His 100 heads were not a symbol of confusion, but of an utterly relentless and inescapable vigilance. While his siblings represented specific, active horrors, Ladon embodied a passive, unmovable threat. He was the consequence, the unblinking sentinel whose very existence was a boundary. To know his family is to understand why he was the only being in all of creation truly fit to guard a treasure that could upset the very balance of the cosmos. His form was a masterpiece of defensive design, a living fortress. Ancient poets and artists consistently depicted Ladon not as a winged, fire-breathing beast of war, but as an immense serpentine dragon whose sheer physical presence was his greatest weapon. His body, thick and scaled in impenetrable patterns of bronze and gold, was so colossal that he did not merely stand beside the sacred apple tree. He was wrapped around it, his coils enveloping the trunk in a perfect, unbreakable embrace. This was not a temporary perch, it was a permanent fusion of guardian and guarded, a symbiotic bond that made the tree and the dragon a single entity. To reach for an apple was to reach directly into the dragon's grasp, but his most legendary feature, the one that truly defined his nature, was his head. He did not possess just one or even three. Ladon was said to have 100 heads. Imagine not a chaotic tangle of necks, but a living, breathing canopy of awareness. Each head rose from his coiled body like a separate sentinel, its eyes independently scanning the horizon, the sky, the very air around the garden. they never all slept at once, creating a watch that was literally endless. And according to some tellings, each of those 100 heads could speak in a different tongue. This was not a random detail of myth, it was a profound statement. It meant that no matter who approached the garden, whether a god from Olympus, a mortal hero from a distant land, or a spirit from the underworld, Ladon could understand them. He could hear their whispered plots, their false promises, and their desperate pleas. He was immune to deception in any language, a guardian who could not be reasoned with, bribed, or tricked because he comprehended every form of trickery. His voice was a chorus of 100 different hisses and whispers, a sound that was the very definition of finality for any who dared to approach the golden apples. This unblinking watchfulness was the very core of his being. For Ladon, guarding the golden apples was not a punishment handed down by the gods, nor was it a tedious chore. It was a sacred charge, a purpose woven into the fabric of his existence from the moment of his creation. Think of him not as a prisoner chained to a tree, but as the ultimate cosmic watchdog, perfectly suited to a role that no other being could fulfill. His lineage from the ancient, untamed forces of the earth and sea meant he was inherently a creature of boundaries, a living barrier between the possible and the forbidden. This duty was his natural state, the reason he was born with 100 heads and a form that could embrace a tree for all eternity. He felt no boredom, no desire for a different life. His entire world was the garden, the rustle of the golden leaves, and the hum of divine power from the fruit. The concept of sleep was alien to him, his vigilance as constant and natural as the tide. This made the simple idea of sneaking past him an absolute impossibility. A thief could not wait for him to doze because he never did. They could not hope to move silently enough because at least one pair of his 200 eyes would always be watching. They could not even rely on a moment of distraction, for his attention was not a single thread that could be broken, but a vast, unbreakable net of awareness. He was less a creature and more a permanent, active condition of the garden itself, a law of nature made flesh and scale. To attempt to steal an apple was not merely to challenge a dragon, it was to challenge the very order that made such a treasure necessary in the first place. Against this perfect guardian stood a hero defined by his imperfections. Heracles, the son of Zeus, was the strongest mortal to ever live, a figure of legendary might whose very name evoked images of monsters slain and kingdoms toppled. Yet his great strength was both a gift and a curse, for it was in a fit of madness brought on by the goddess Hera that he committed a terrible crime, slaughtering his own wife and children. To atone for this unspeakable act, he was condemned to serve his weak cousin, King Eurystheus, and perform 12 labors. These were not simple tasks, they were feats designed to be impossible, each one a journey into the heart of danger to defeat a monster or retrieve a treasure from the edge of the known world. He had already strangled the Nemean lion with his bare hands, cleansed the Augean stables in a single day, and journeyed to the underworld and back. By the time he faced his 11th labor, Heracles was a veteran of the impossible. And then Eurystheus gave him his most audacious command yet, to bring back the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. The sheer scale of this task would have broken a lesser man. He was not merely being sent to steal a piece of fruit, he was being ordered to defeat a fundamental law of the cosmos, to outwit a being who had never slept, whose understanding was absolute, and whose physical form was a perfect defense. Heracles, with all his godlike strength, was being asked to succeed where gods themselves had feared to tread. How does a hero, even the greatest of heroes, overcome a challenge where brute force is utterly useless? Strength alone would not be enough to pass the dragon. Heracles stood at the precipice of his greatest challenge, a puzzle that his famous club and bow could not solve. Ladon was an immortal being, a direct child of ancient titans. To kill him was not just difficult, it was an impossibility, a violation of the cosmic order itself. Even the mighty son of Zeus could not snuff out a divine life force. This left him with a profound dilemma. How do you defeat a foe you cannot harm, bypass a vigilance that never ends, and steal from a grasp that is literally unbreakable? His journey, therefore, became one not of conquest but of cunning. Heracles understood that to succeed, he would need wisdom greater than his own strength. He set out across the world, consulting oracles and seeking the counsel of those who possessed ancient knowledge. His path led him to the wise sea god, Nereus, the old man of the sea, known for his vast knowledge and his ability to shapeshift to avoid answering questions. Heracles had to wrestle with the slippery deity, holding him through countless transformations until the exhausted god finally relented and revealed the secret. He could not face Ladon directly. Instead, the path to the apples lay through an unexpected intermediary, the Titan Atlas, who held the weight of the sky upon his shoulders. This was the heart of the strategy, a brilliant end run around an unsolvable problem. Heracles would not fight the dragon himself. He would enlist the one being in all the world who could walk past the guardian without a fight, a being who belonged in that sacred garden. The hero's greatest weapon, it turned out, was not his muscle but his mind, his willingness to seek help and to orchestrate a solution where direct force was doomed to fail. Deep in the western mountains, Heracles found the Titan Atlas, a site of profound and eternal suffering. This was no ordinary giant, but a primordial force bearing a punishment that defied comprehension. Upon his shoulders rested the entire celestial sphere, the dome of the sky with all its constellations and stars. The weight was not physical in the way a boulder is heavy. It was a metaphysical burden, an endless strain that would have crushed any other being into dust. Atlas stood as the literal pillar between the heavens and the earth, his muscles coiled in perpetual, agonizing tension. This was the key to the entire plan. Heracles, with the sea god's advice fresh in his mind, approached the Titan not with a threat but with a proposition. He offered Atlas a temporary reprieve, a few moments of freedom he had not known for eons. In exchange, the Titan, who was the father of the Hesperides nymphs, would simply walk into his daughter's garden. He would be no intruder but a familiar presence, a parent visiting his children. To the ever-watchful Ladon, this would not register as a threat. The dragon, understanding every language, would recognize its master's father and see no reason to attack or even raise an alarm. Atlas, tempted by the mere thought of setting down his unbearable load, eagerly agreed. The deal was struck, a moment of cosmic significance where the fate of a divine treasure rested on a clever trick and a temporary trade. With immense care and a strength that rivaled the Titan's own, Heracles shifted the weight of the sky onto his own shoulders. For the first time since the age of the Titans had ended, Atlas was free. He stretched his limbs, feeling a sensation he had long forgotten, and then he walked away toward the garden, leaving the hero to bear the unimaginable weight of the cosmos alone. Atlas walked into the twilight garden, a place he had not seen since the world was young. The air, thick with the scent of divine blossoms and the quiet hum of magic, was familiar to him. The Hesperides, his own daughters, did not flee from his presence but watched with curious eyes as their father, free from his cosmic burden, approached the heart of their sanctuary. There, coiled around the shimmering tree, was Ladon. The dragon's 100 heads stirred, a soft rustle of scales as countless eyes turned to observe the Titan. This was the critical moment. Would the perfect guardian perceive a threat? But Atlas was no intruder, no thief sneaking in the shadows. He was family, the father of the nymphs who tended this very grove. To Ladon's ancient polyglot mind, this was not a breach of protocol but a permitted visit. The dragon, understanding the bonds of kinship in every language, did not attack. Its heads remained watchful but calm, a living, breathing fence that saw no reason to bar the path of its master's own grandfather. With that implicit trust, the inviolable watch was broken. Atlas simply reached through the serene canopy of heads and plucked 3 golden apples from the branches. The fruit came away with a soft, chime-like sound, their radiant light gleaming in his palm. It was not a victory of force or a feat of trickery, but a betrayal of a sacred understanding. The system had been fooled not by a weakness in the god, but by a flaw in its very programming, its inability to conceive that a trusted member of the family could be the agent of its failure. The apples were now in the hands of a titan who had just tasted freedom, and the fate of the cosmos hung in the balance once more. But what became of the dragon after the apples were gone? The ancient sources themselves are locked in a strange and telling conflict. In one version of the tale, it is the titan Atlas who, upon his return from the garden, finds the great serpent slain. In another, it is Heracles himself, perhaps in a final act of violence upon the helpless guardian, who takes the dragon's life. This inconsistency is more than a simple plot hole, it is a deep fracture in the story's meaning. How could an immortal being, born of primordial titans, be killed at all? The very idea seems to break the rules of the mythic world, yet this contradiction speaks to a profound tragedy at the heart of Ladon's story. His entire existence was his purpose, to be the unbreakable shield for the golden apples. The moment the fruit was plucked, that purpose was irrevocably shattered. In a very real sense, whether a weapon struck him down or not, the dragon died in that instant. His invincible vigilance was proven fallible, his perfect defense was breached. What is an eternal guardian when the thing he was made to guard is gone? He becomes a relic, a monument to a failed duty. His death, whether literal or symbolic, represents the collapse of an absolute order. It is the moment a fundamental law of the cosmos is shown to have a loophole, proving that no security, no matter how perfect, is truly everlasting. The real tragedy is not that a monster was slain, but that a cosmic principle was broken. The death of Ladon, in any version, marks the end of an era where some things were simply meant to be untouchable. Yet from this tragedy, a new kind of immortality was waiting. High above the mortal world, far beyond the reach of any hero or titan, the night sky holds the final chapter of Ladon's story. There, coiled around the celestial North Pole, you can find the constellation Draco, the dragon. This is not a random scattering of stars, it is the image of the great guardian himself, placed in the heavens as an eternal memorial. His long, sinuous body is traced by a winding chain of stars, circling the pole star as he once coiled around the golden tree. He does not stand upright or lie flat, but is forever frozen in that protective spiral, a silent sentinel for all time. The ancient Greeks saw this not as a further punishment, but as a profound honor bestowed by the gods, perhaps by Zeus himself or by his mother, the goddess Hera. Why would they grant such a reward to a guardian who had failed? Because his failure was not one of neglect or cowardice. He was undone by a loophole in the very fabric of his purpose, a betrayal of kinship he was never designed to suspect. By placing him among the stars, the gods acknowledged the purity of his eternal watch. They transformed him from a specific guardian of a single tree into a universal symbol of protection, his celestial form now guarding the very axis of the world. His new duty was grander than his old one, a silent, shining monument to the idea of vigilance itself. Look up on a clear night, find that great dragon winding between the Big and Little Dippers, and you are looking directly at the undying spirit of Ladon, forever watchful, forever coiled around the heart of the sky. Far beneath the sunlit waves, in the lightless depths where the ancient world still held its breath, a different kind of sorrow took root. This was the domain of Phorcys and Ceter, the primordial sea gods who were Ladon's parents. They were not the tidy, human-like gods of Olympus, but older, wilder forces, embodiments of the sea's hidden wonders and profound dangers. Their children were the very monsters that haunted the edges of maps and the depths of nightmares. For them, the death of their son was not just a loss, it was a profound personal violation. Imagine their grief not as a human emotion, but as a tectonic shift in the deep ocean floor. The sea itself would have grown colder, the currents shifting with a parent's rage. Their son, a being of perfect, eternal purpose, had been made obsolete, his sacred duty rendered meaningless by a clever trick. This was not a glorious death in a fair fight, it was the dismantling of a cosmic fixture. Their anger was the ocean's fury, a silent, boundless wrath from the old world toward the new. This personal tragedy was a single note in a much larger symphony of downfall. The death of Ladon was a clear signal that the age of their kind, the age of the ancient titans and their monstrous children, was irrevocably over. They were the old gods of raw, untamed nature, beings of immense power but little subtlety. The Olympians, with their laws, their cities, and their cunning human heroes, represented a new order, one that did not simply conquer through brute force, but through intellect, manipulation, and a willingness to bend the very rules of existence. Heracles did not just kill a dragon, he demonstrated that the old ways of power could be outmaneuvered. The grief of Phorcys and Ceto was therefore twofold: the intimate pain of losing a child, and the devastating realization that the world they represented was being systematically erased, replaced by an order that had no place for their primal, terrifying majesty. This silent, starry dragon once held a vibrant life in the hands of ancient artists, on the curved surfaces of clay vases and within the crumbling pigments of temple frescoes. We find the most intimate portrait of Ladon, not as a cosmic concept, but as a living, breathing creature. The Greeks did not depict him as a terrifying beast to be slain in a glorious battle. Instead, his image is one of profound and peaceful integration. The most common motif shows him not in a fighting pose, but in a perfect, graceful spiral, his long, serpentine body wrapped snugly around the trunk of the apple tree. His head's often shown as a manageable cluster of 5, 10, or 12 rather than a literal 100, crane upwards, not in aggression, but in a state of calm, perpetual observation. He is often painted in the same dark glaze as the tree itself, his form blending with the branches he protects, a visual representation of his unity with his duty. In these scenes, Heracles is sometimes present, but the focus is rarely on combat. Often, the hero is shown receiving the apples directly from the Hesperides nymphs, with Ladon coiled peacefully in the background, a quiet witness to his own obsolescence. This artistic choice is deeply revealing. It tells us that for the ancient Greeks, Ladon's essence was not violence but guardianship. He was a part of the garden's beautiful, sacred ecology, not an external monster imposed upon it. Over centuries, his portrayal subtly shifted. In earlier black figure pottery, he is a more rigid, patterned form, a symbolic part of the scene. But as red figure techniques developed, allowing for more fluid lines and naturalistic detail, Ladon becomes more dynamic. His coils appear more supple, his scales more textured, his many heads possessing a gentle, almost curious expression. This evolution reflects a changing attitude, a move from seeing him as a mere mythological fixture to understanding him as a character with a specific and ultimately tragic role to play. The art does not celebrate his defeat, it memorializes his silent, eternal watch, preserving in clay and color the image of a perfect guardian, forever bound to his sacred charge. This pattern of the serpent guardian coils through the mythology of nearly every ancient culture. Far to the north, in the icy roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, the dragon Herga ceaselessly gnaws at its roots. This is not a guardian of a single treasure, but a corrosive force of entropy itself, a creature dedicated to the slow, inevitable decay of the cosmos. Its purpose is not protection but destruction, a stark contrast to Ladon's unwavering, protective stillness. Then look to the ancient hymns of India, where the great serpent Vritra embodies a different kind of threat. He is a drought demon, a hoarder who has stolen all the waters of the world, coiled around the rivers and mountains to keep them from humanity. He is an active oppressor, a villain to be slain by the thunder god Indra so that life may flow once more. These dragons are antagonists, representations of chaos, greed, and stagnation that the gods and heroes must violently overcome. So what makes Ladon's story so distinctly different, so profoundly Greek? He is not an agent of chaos to be defeated, but a fundamental pillar of order to be circumvented. His role is not to hoard for greed or to spread decay, but to preserve a sacred balance. The Greek world deeply valued harmony, boundaries, and the proper place of all things, from the lowest mortal to the highest god. Ladon was the ultimate expression of a necessary boundary. He was not evil, he was essential. The conflict in his story does not arise from his malevolence, but from the sheer, irresistible temptation of what he protects. The hero's quest is not to destroy a monster, but to solve an impossible puzzle that threatens to upset a divine equilibrium. This reframes the entire narrative from a simple battle of good versus evil into a far more complex and tragic exploration of order, cleverness, and the price of transgressing a perfect system. Ladon's coils around that golden tree were far more than a physical barrier. They represented the ultimate boundary between the mortal and the divine, a living symbol of the untamable world that existed before the order of the gods. He was nature in its most raw and formidable state, not as a destructive storm, but as an immovable mountain, a deep ocean trench, a law of the universe given physical form. To the ancient Greek mind, the world was filled with such sacred spaces, places of power that were not meant for human possession. Ladon was the guardian of that principle, a reminder that some mysteries are too profound to be owned, that some powers should remain forever just out of reach. His 100 heads were not just for watching, they were a metaphor for the countless facets of nature's defenses, the infinite ways the world has of protecting its most sacred secrets. Yet the treasure he guarded adds another profound layer to his symbolism. The golden apples were not mere wealth, they were the very essence of immortality and divine knowledge. To possess one was to grasp a power meant only for the gods. This transforms Ladon from a simple obstacle into the guardian of ultimate wisdom, the protector of a truth so potent that its release could upset the balance of all creation. He stands at the threshold of enlightenment, a final test before one accesses a power they may not be ready to wield. In this light, the hero's journey to steal the apples is not a simple theft, but a forbidden quest for knowledge, an attempt to seize a god's secret. Ladon then becomes the necessary gatekeeper, ensuring that such a monumental leap is not taken lightly, that only the most cunning, the most resilient, and the most resourceful can even hope to pass. This leads to the final and perhaps most human layer of his meaning. Ladon is the archetypal necessary obstacle. A hero cannot be forged in comfort or safety. True growth, legendary glory, is only born from overcoming a challenge that seems insurmountable. Ladon was the perfect incarnation of that challenge. His invincibility forced Heracles to think, to seek wisdom, to rely on cleverness over brute strength. The dragon was the anvil upon which the hero's character was hammered and refined. Without this impossible task, Heracles' story would be one of simple strength, a list of monsters clubbed into submission. But because of Ladon, his 11th labor becomes a lesson in humility, strategy, and the complex interplay between force and intellect. The dragon was not an enemy to be hated, but a monumental problem to be solved, a riddle written in scales and vigilance. His existence asked a fundamental question of every would-be hero. What are you willing to become, and what are you willing to risk to reach for something the universe has deemed forbidden? But what of the garden's gentle caretakers? The Hesperides, whose very name means the daughters of the evening, lived in a world of perpetual sunset, a soft, golden haze that should have been free from conflict. They were not merely gardeners, they were the spirit of that sacred place, their song as natural to the orchard as the rustle of the golden leaves. Their relationship with Ladon was one of profound and peaceful symbiosis. He was not a jailer to them, but a quiet, immovable part of their home, a living wall that allowed their tranquil existence to continue, unbothered by the greed of gods or mortals. They tended the tree and he protected it, a perfect, silent partnership. When their father, the Titan Atlas, walked into their midst, it would not have seemed like an invasion. It was a family visit, a moment of wonder and reunion. They had no reason to suspect that his newfound freedom was a bargain struck with a hero straining under the weight of the sky. Their trust was absolute, and in that trust lay the flaw. Were they complicit only in their innocence? They were the keepers of the garden, not the wardens of the dragon. They understood the care of the apples, but not the intricate deceptions of the outside world. Their perspective reframes the entire theft not as a glorious heist, but as a violation of a sacred trust. They were victims of a plan that exploited the very bonds that made their world beautiful. The moment Atlas plucked the fruit, their peaceful world shattered. The silent guardian they had lived alongside for eons had been rendered powerless not by force, but by a betrayal he was never designed to foresee. The Hesperides were left in a garden that was, in an instant, no longer sacred, its heart stolen and its eternal watchman defeated. Their golden twilight must have felt a little colder, their songs a little quieter, as they witnessed the end of their own perfect age. Heracles stands under the weight of the sky, a position of unimaginable strain that redefines the very nature of his strength. For once, his legendary muscles are not the instruments of victory, but a temporary substitute, a bargaining chip in a far more delicate game. This labor was never about clubbing a monster into submission. It was a test of intellect, a puzzle box that could only be opened with guile. His heroism here is not measured in the force of a blow, but in the quiet patience of holding up the heavens while another completed the task he could not. He had to swallow his pride, the very pride that so often defined him, and become a strategist. He orchestrated the entire sequence, from wrestling the sea god for knowledge to striking a deal with a titan. This was not a deviation from heroism, but its evolution. True strength, this labor argues, is not just the power to destroy what stands in your path, but the wisdom to find a path around it. It is the ability to see the board, not just the pieces, and to move others as skillfully as you would move your own hands. Heracles proved that the greatest obstacles are not always broken, they are outmaneuvered. The golden apples were not won by a stronger hero, but by a smarter one. While Heracles' quest is the most famous, Ladon's coils appear in other corners of Greek legend, guarding different treasures and challenging other heroes. One lesser-known tale involves the original voyage of the Argonauts, the band of heroes led by Jason in search of the Golden Fleece. As their legendary ship, the Argo, sailed toward its destination, some ancient poets say it passed the very shores of the Hesperides' garden. In this version, the heroes did not see a peaceful dragon coiled around a tree, but a fearsome beast freshly slain, its immense body lying beside the sacred trunk. It was the mighty Heracles himself, who had been traveling with the Argonauts for a time, who was credited with the kill. This story fragment creates a fascinating overlap in the timeline of myth, suggesting that Heracles' great labor may have been accomplished during his adventures with Jason's crew, a detail lost in the grander, more isolated telling of his 12 labors. It paints a picture of a hero whose legend was so vast that it could intersect with other epic journeys, his shadow falling across multiple stories. Another variation shifts the Guardian's fate away from violence entirely. In a more peaceful telling, the great serpent was never killed by Heracles or anyone else. Instead, after the apples were taken and its purpose fulfilled, the grieving goddess Hera, who had placed Ladon in the garden originally, lifted him up to the stars herself as an act of compassion. She honored his flawless service by giving him a new, eternal duty in the night sky, transforming his failure into a celestial honor. This version removes the stain of murder from Heracles' legacy and reframes the story as one of divine reward rather than tragic defeat. The very origin of the golden apples themselves is also a subject of fascinating debate. While most agree they were a wedding gift from the earth goddess Gaia, some regional stories claim the tree was a direct creation of Hera, planted in the garden to celebrate her marriage to Zeus. In this telling, Ladon's guardianship was not just a job, but a deeply personal charge from the Queen of Olympus to protect a symbol of her own power and union. This small shift in the story's foundation makes his role even more significant, elevating him from a cosmic security system to the personal guardian of a queen's most cherished possession. These alternative myths are not mere inconsistencies, they are the living breath of an oral tradition. They show a culture wrestling with the meaning of a great myth, experimenting with different outcomes for its characters, and seeking to find the most resonant truth in the space between a hero's glory and a guardian's sacrifice. The ancient dragon's shadow stretches far beyond the crumbling temples of Greece, finding new life in the glowing screens and printed pages of our modern world. In fantasy novels, Ladon has been reborn as the archetypal treasure guardian, a trope so fundamental we scarcely question its origin. You see his coiled form in the dragons hoarding gold in the mountains of Middle-earth, or in the great serpent sleeping atop magical artifacts in countless young adult series. But modern authors often take his core concept and twist it for a new era. In some tales, he is no longer a mindless beast but a tragic, speaking character, cursed with his eternal duty and longing for release. This reframes the entire conflict from a simple heist into a moral dilemma, forcing the hero to question whether they are a thief or a liberator. Role-playing games have fully embraced his tactical potential. In systems like Dungeons and Dragons, creatures inspired by Ladon are not just end-boss monsters to be slain, they are complex environmental puzzles. A game master might place a Hydra, a clear descendant of the 100-headed Watcher, coiled around a vital artifact. The players cannot simply charge in swinging swords. They must use diplomacy, illusion, or clever distractions, perhaps even seeking out a titan-like figure to bypass the Guardian, directly echoing the strategy of Heracles. These games translate the ancient myth into a set of rules and choices, allowing players to live out the very problem the hero faced. It turns a passive story into an active, personal challenge, teaching a new generation that the greatest obstacles demand more than brute force. Cinema and television, with their need for visual spectacle, have adapted Ladon for the big screen, though often simplifying his profound symbolism. He appears not as a serene, coiled sentinel, but as a thrilling antagonist, a final barrier for the hero to overcome in a climactic battle. His multiple heads become a spectacle of CGI, each one a separate threat to be dodged and defeated. While this loses the subtlety of his original role as a passive, eternal condition, it captures the sheer scale and awe of the primordial guardian. These modern interpretations from the page to the pixel prove that Ladon's essence is timeless. He is the ultimate guardian, a concept as relevant in a digital fantasy world as it was in an ancient sacred grove. Each adaptation, whether faithful or wildly inventive, is a conversation with the past, asking anew the old, compelling question: how do you take something that was never meant to be taken? The garden's true location was a mystery that haunted the ancient world. While poets agreed it lay in the distant west where the sun each day died in a blaze of color, pinning it to a map was an impossible task. Some of the earliest Greek historians pointed toward the rugged spine of the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, a land of towering peaks that seemed to hold up the very sky. They believed the garden rested in a secluded, fertile valley there, a hidden paradise shielded by the Titan's own stony body. Yet another, even more compelling theory placed it not on the mainland, but on a mythical island at the very edge of the ocean, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was the ultimate terra incognita, a place off the charts, accessible only to the most daring or divinely guided travelers. To the Greek mind, the West was the direction of endings, of finality, where the land of the dead was also said to reside. This association with twilight and eternity made it the only logical home for a garden of immortal fruit. The very elusiveness of its coordinates was not a flaw in the story, but its central feature. A place you could simply sail to on an ordinary map could never hold a treasure of such cosmic significance. Its shifting geography, from a North African mountain range to a phantom isle in the Atlantic mists, was a powerful narrative device. It meant the garden was not just a physical place but a state of being, a destination you could only reach when you were ready to confront the absolute boundaries of the world. This profound ambiguity directly enhanced Ladon's own mystique. A dragon guarding a specific, known cave is one thing. A dragon guarding a place that might not even have a fixed location is something else entirely. His watch was not over a mere piece of land, but over an idea, a concept of divine privilege. You could not find a path around him because you could not even be sure of the path itself. He became the guardian of a rumor, the warden of a dream at the edge of the world, making his inevitable defeat not just a theft but the conquest of the last great unknown. Yet the objects of all this conflict were far more than simple fruit. The golden apples of the Hesperides pulsed with a power that could rewrite the very laws of life and death. To consume one was not merely to satisfy hunger, but to undergo a fundamental transformation, stripping away mortality and granting the eater a state of eternal youth and vitality. This was not the grim, shadowy existence of the underworld, but a vibrant, unending life in the full bloom of health and power. They were a direct conduit to the divine, a physical piece of the god's own essence. This is why they were a wedding gift from the earth to Hera, a symbol of her eternal union and the unassailable authority that came with it. For a goddess, they were a reaffirmation of status. For a mortal, they were the ultimate transgression, a chance to steal a fire that was never meant for human hands. But the apple's influence was not confined to that single garden. Their symbolic power rippled through other great myths, most famously in the event that would become known as the Apple of Discord. At the wedding of the hero Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis, the goddess of strife, Eris, tossed a single golden apple into the celebration, inscribed with the words "for the fairest." This was not a gift but a weapon. Three goddesses immediately claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each believing themselves the most beautiful. Their petty, divine squabble was handed down to a mortal prince, Paris of Troy, to settle. His choice of Aphrodite, who promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the epic Trojan War, the deaths of countless heroes, and the fall of a mighty city. One single apple, a sibling to those guarded by Ladon, proved that this divine fruit carried not only the gift of life, but also the seed of catastrophic discord, a duality that makes their perfect guardian all the more necessary and his ultimate failure all the more profound. So we are left with the most profound question about this ancient dragon, a question that lies at the heart of his tragedy. What was it like to be Ladon? Was he merely a biological alarm system, a beautiful and complex machine driven by primal instinct? Or was there a mind within those 100 heads, a consciousness capable of understanding the weight of its own purpose? The myths give us no easy answer, and that silence is where his true depth resides. To see him as a simple beast is to miss the point of his story entirely. A mindless creature feels no allegiance, no dedication. It acts on hunger or fear, but Ladon felt none of those things. He never hungered for the apples he guarded, and he certainly had no reason to fear any intruder. His actions were not driven by base impulse, but by a profound and singular focus. This suggests a different kind of intelligence, one not of curiosity or ambition, but of pure, unwavering commitment. He was the embodiment of loyalty itself, a sentinel whose entire world was the boundary of that garden and the shimmer of those golden leaves. Imagine the quiet hum of his existence, a symphony of vigilance conducted by 100 pairs of eyes, a mind not cluttered with the chaos of thought, but purified into a single, eternal statement. I am here, I watch, this is my purpose. He was, in the most literal sense, his duty. His consciousness was not separate from his task, it was defined by it. To remove the apples was not just to rob him of a job, it was to dismantle his very soul. This transforms his story from a simple guard dog narrative into a profound philosophical exploration of identity. What are we without the purpose that defines us? For Ladon, the answer was a silence more final than any death. His loyalty was so absolute, his service so perfect that it became the entirety of his being. In the end, he was not a monster who was defeated. He was a principle that was broken. Ladon's story is a single, shimmering scale in the hide of a much larger beast, the epic war for the cosmos itself. His fate was sealed long before Heracles ever set foot in the garden. In the primordial struggle between the old world and the new, the age of the Titans, the raw, untamed forces of earth, sea, and sky, was a time of immense power but little order. This was the world of Ladon's parents, Phorcys and Ceter, the ancient gods of the deep and its monstrous wonders. Their children, from the Gorgons to the Griae, were not evil, but they were embodiments of a chaotic, unforgiving nature. They represented the world's wild, untamable heart. The rise of the Olympians, led by Zeus, was not merely a change of management on Mount Olympus. It was a revolution, the imposition of law, civilization, and a new cosmic order upon that primal chaos. The Titans were overthrown and imprisoned, and their monstrous children became obstacles to be cleared, remnants of a fading era. In this grand narrative, Ladon was a perfect symbol of the old guard. He was a Titan-born creature of immense passive power, tasked with maintaining a sacred, unchanging boundary. His very existence was a statement from the old world, a declaration that some things were absolute and should remain forever untouched. The arrival of Heracles, the son of Zeus and the ultimate agent of the new Olympian order, was therefore inevitable. This was not just a hero on a quest, it was the new world testing the defenses of the old. Heracles did not defeat Ladon with the raw, Titan-like power of his father, but with the very tools that defined the Olympian ascendancy, cunning, strategy, and the manipulation of existing rules. He used the Titan Atlas as a pawn, turning the old family bonds of the primordial world against itself. Ladon's downfall, then, was a microcosm of the entire cosmic shift. The old, absolute powers, no matter how perfectly designed, were vulnerable to the new, clever order. The dragon's failure was the final proof that the age of simple, monumental force was over, replaced by an era where intellect and guile could topple even the most eternal of sentinels. His death, whether literal or symbolic, was the closing of a chapter, the moment the last perfect guardian of the primordial world fell, and the age of heroes truly began. Ladon's story endures not because it is simple, but because it is layered with profound human questions that echo across the centuries. At its core, the myth speaks to our own deep, often contradictory longings. We are drawn to the idea of immortality, symbolized by those gleaming golden apples, yet we are equally captivated by the noble guardian sworn to keep them from us. This tension is the story's very heart. We admire Ladon's unwavering dedication, his complete and total commitment to a purpose, even as we cheer for the hero whose success requires the guardian's failure. It forces us to wonder, where does our true sympathy lie, with the perfect, unchanging order, or with the ambitious spirit that dares to disrupt it for a greater prize? The myth refuses to offer easy villains or pure heroes. Heracles is not a malicious thief, but a complex figure seeking redemption, while Ladon is not an evil monster but a sacred protector. This ambiguity makes the tale feel real, resonant, and strangely tragic. We recognize the cost of progress, the beautiful, necessary things that must be lost for a new order to be born. The Garden of the Hesperides represents a world of perfect, untouched beauty and danger, a realm where magic is real and consequences are eternal. Ladon is the soul of that world, and his passing, whether lifted to the stars or slain upon the earth, marks the end of that enchanted age. We are left with a sense of awe and a touch of melancholy, mourning the silent sentinel even as we marvel at the hero's cleverness. His story reminds us that every great quest, every reach for something forbidden, carries a price, and that the most compelling legends are those that live in the delicate, heartbreaking space between what was and what had to be. His journey from the dark, primordial sea to the eternal night sky captures the full arc of a cosmic life. Ladon began as a child of the ancient deep, a being of raw, untamed power, and was shaped into the perfect guardian for a treasure that could alter the very order of the world. He stood as the ultimate boundary, not out of malice, but as a necessary piece of the universe's design, a silent promise that some things are meant to remain sacred and out of reach. His story is so much more than a simple obstacle in a hero's path. It is a profound exploration of duty, loyalty, and the tragic cost of progress. When Heracles outmaneuvered him, it was not merely a victory, but a fundamental shift, signaling the end of an old, absolute world and the uncertain dawn of a new one. In his failure, Ladon found a different kind of purpose, transformed from the warden of a single tree into a celestial symbol of protection for the entire axis of the heavens. He is a vital thread in the rich tapestry of Greek myth, a reminder that the most compelling figures are not always the heroes who win, but the guardians who define what is worth winning. So the next time you gaze up at the stars, find that winding constellation coiled between the bears. See the dragon, forever frozen in his watchful spiral, a silent sentinel whose story of primordial power and eternal sacrifice is written in light. We would love to hear which mythical guardian captures your imagination. Is it another dragon, a griffin, or a sphinx? Share your favorite watcher from the world's legends in the comments below.